Would you deny then that there have been harassments, constant searches and acts of brutality by your soldiers?
We must make searches here and there. We must make all sorts of punitive actions, that's true, but only in the very few cases when we are dealing with terrorists. There is a certain group in Israel who wants to see these areas as part of Israel. This is not the official stand.
This is Allenby Bridge from the west side of the Jordan, the Israeli-occupied West Bank. A short time ago, reporting from the other side, the East Bank, which is still under Jordanian rule from Amman, I heard stories of ill treatment by Israeli troops on the West Bank here to force Jordanian families into crossing the river, to harass them into leaving their homes, crossing the river and becoming refugees as an instrument, as a deliberate act of Israeli government policy. Well, of course, the Israelis, as you'd expect, deny any such policy. But it's not simply a matter of allegation and denial. It's the whole complex problem of how a conquered people suddenly become a subject people, live with their conquerors. And when they're provoked, the Israelis can get tough. In Hebron, one of the oldest towns of the East, Israeli soldiers guard against trouble either from their own tourists or from the Arabs, whose great mosque this was. It contains tombs of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For hundreds of years, Jews were not allowed beyond the 5th step of the staircase. Now the Mosque of Abraham is open to them by conquest, with Muslims allowed in 4 times a day for prayers. It's a constant reminder to them that Israel is now in charge. The Hebron area has recently had a taste of what the population can expect if they shelter saboteurs. The Israeli authorities admit that they do blow up Arab houses when there's some direct evidence to link those houses to terrorist activities. This Russian-made Kalashnikov automatic rifle in beautiful working order was taken from one of 7 Arabs killed in a clash with Israeli soldiers a few weeks ago. The Israelis say the men's tracks led directly back to the village of Shuyuk. So the Israelis blew up 9 houses there, and the military commander of the Hebron area here keeps this Russian rifle and its charged magazine as a souvenir. Saboteurs said to be from the Al-Fatah terrorist organization were hiding on the outskirts of this village. A guide showed me the cave where 7 of them died fighting Israeli troops. Next day, the Israelis blasted down 9 houses in a rapid reprisal. The Israelis say they now have 600 Al-Fatah terrorists in their prisons. There are searches and curfews, and where a link is established, down go the houses. This farming village is El Hubela. It was here that 6 families I met as refugees at Karame camp in Jordan had their homes. They told me then that they had finally given in to Israeli attempts to get rid of them by ill treatment, searches, and accusations that they were hiding weapons. I came to check their story. They were frightened people and they had left, but their story appears to have been exaggerated. They told me 70 families had left. This man, who remains, says 20. He did not know or admit to me of ill treatment by Israeli troops, but there had been many searches. He says the families left because money from relatives on the east bank of the Jordan had stopped coming, and that they hoped for better soil to farm. The Israeli army agree the village has been searched for Al-Fatah, but not more than normal. On the roads around the towns, the Israelis are trying to keep unemployed Arabs busy widening roads by hand. Machines would do it faster, but they want to provide the men with work and say the 12 and 6 a day they earn is more than most of them had before. If you want a clue, no more, to the feelings of Israelis for Arabs at the moment, you needn't come any further than this place here, the front garden of the house which was the home of the commander of the Arab Legion camp in Azariah, just outside Jerusalem, a village where Jesus lived. His front path, nicely and solidly paved, is made of Jewish tombstones taken from Jewish cemeteries on the slopes of the Mount of Olives. As one Israeli pointed out to me, they've even put them down, inscription side up. I talked about the West Bank situation to the military coordinator of the occupied areas, Colonel Shlomo Gazit.
Colonel, you have been accused of deliberately harassing the West Bank population through your troops in order to keep them on the move and get them out of the West Bank as an act of Israeli government policy. Is it Israeli government policy or is it not?
I think, first of all, it's definitely not Israeli policy. Second, as a fact, it's not true. And I think the best proof is to see that there are about 800,000 citizens living in the Western Bank who didn't live and who live prosperously in the area, and you can see it.
But 300 a day are still leaving, are they not?
I think the numbers are much lower. The numbers leaving today are about, from the Western Bank only, between, let's say, 50, 80 daily, not more.
Well, the estimate on the other side is 300.
Well, there are an addition of about more or less the same number of people living the Gaza Strip. So altogether it reaches about 150, perhaps up to 200 daily. Half of them from the Gaza Strip, half from the Western Bank.
Would you deny then that incidents have happened, that there have been harassments, constant searches and acts of brutality by your soldiers?
Well, let's separate two questions. One is our dealing with the population in general. No accidents, no incidents, no harassing. And I would say in most cases they hardly see us at all except as tourists. The other story, the other part is our problem dealing with the terrorists. In those cases, of course, we must impose, let's say, a curfew. We must make searches here and there. We must make all sorts of punitive actions. That's true, but only in the very few cases when we are dealing with terrorists.
How serious are you being hit by these al-Fatah terrorists which lead to reprisals against villagers?
Well, relatively, I wouldn't say it's very serious. The damages done up to now are relatively very small. No important damage either to industry or to the population in general. But of course, we must be very careful. It might change from one day to another.
I was talking to one of your officers the other day and he referred to the new Israel. He was talking about Israel within its present extended boundaries. Was this an unwitting slip about official thinking?
Well, official, definitely it's not official thinking, but everybody has his own opinion. And there is a certain group in Israel who calls these areas liberated areas and wants to see these areas as part of Israel. This is not the official stand.
For the Arabs who fled, there's no coming back. For those who stay, life isn't always pleasant. It may not be Israeli policy to force people to leave, but there's certainly no encouragement for them to stay. At a time when you hear talk of the new Israel, every Arab who decides to get away from the frustrations of the Israeli occupation is one Arab fewer with a stake in the West Bank.